If you do not find a way, no one will.
You have my sword. And you have my bow. And my axe.
Middle-earth stands upon the brink of destruction. You will unite or you will fall.
Welcome all. I'm your host Sully, and with me I have a newcomer, Lord of the Rings superfan from Sydney, Daniel Lewis. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Anytime. I was actually surprised at how many people I was able to interest in this subject, which was good because this has been kind of in the works for a while. I was just like, hey, I see people talking about different movies and books, but very rarely do I see them actually discuss like the book that inspired the movie or a video game spinoff or even a comic book continuation. And if there is, it's like here and there. It's not all the time.
Yeah, these games are in a funky sort of category because there's obviously people who play them. There's the book fans that play the games, and then there's the people who obviously saw the films,
cartoons, even
and the cartoons. Yeah, absolutely.
We covered a bunch of those on here, but there's always something new. And I was able to actually cover a comic book that adapted it was distributed throughout parts of Spain, Mexico, and it was adapting the 70s Ralph Botsky Lord of the Rings. Wonderful artwork.
Yeah, that was a cracker. Would you say the Bakshi cartoon?
Yeah. They adapted it into a comic, and it was very hard to find. It was a free-parter.
Now is that the rotoscoped one, or it was? I get confused with those ones.
Yes, that's the one. The one that went to theaters. There was also one that adapted the most of the books, but it was also in comic form. But then I think it was throughout the 90s, and then they re-released it to capitalize on the success of the movie. But I read that, and that was also just very awesome how someone, if you couldn't comprehend that book and you needed a picture book with detailed text, that was probably the way to do it instead of notes.
I'd be interested to see a Lord of the Rings story told in a comic book format. I wonder if it'd be.
There's a lot of free comic book sites online. You can also find them on, and I totally recommend just make sure you have an ad blocker because there's spam galore.
Already, wicked.
It is.
I don't know if you. I don't know. I was going to say there's a game coming out just today. In fact, I believe it's coming out today. It's called Return to Moria.
Oh wow!
And you play as like a bunch of dwarves, and I think the story is.
I see what you're talking about. Wow.
Looks... Yeah. It's set in the fourth age, and I think your dwarves reclaiming, Moria from the orcs, and the other bad things that lurk there. I think it's coming out today. I could be. I've been wrong before.
It says October 24th, so maybe tomorrow, but we will see. It's for Windows, PS5, Xbox Series XS. So wow, I'm totally escaped me. That is actually very cool.
Yeah,
So
it'll just have to sell a couple more copies than the Gollum game, the recent Gollum game, and
yeah,
I'm sure it'll do well.
well, we'll tread on that one briefly. So long story short, we did this chat initially with another Lord of the Rings podcast, and then they decided to be dickbags and decide, hey, we're just not feeling it. Don't ever post that episode. I was like, okay, you were really enjoying the experience, but I'll respect your wishes, even though this is a waste of my time.
Well, you'll have to give me the name of the podcast in the chat later. I'm curious.
Well, what's a real shame is, despite that awful experience, they are a really cool podcast. It was just one of those, just like, come on, man.
That is a bummer.
Even if I'm not crazy about the final episode, I want to put on a show. So whatever. But so there's a lot of Lord of the Rings video games. There's just, I'm a millennial, but what was your, before we get started, what was your intro into the Lord of the Rings Tolkien verse? Like, I read The Hobbit 3 times growing up and watched the movies a bunch of times, then later went back and, I mean, I had seen the animated Lord of the Rings also, but I finally read the Lord of the Rings books themselves, like, as I got older. I struggled with the Silmarillion, but I've just always adored every aspect of it all. And I mainly also played the PlayStation 2 video game adaptations of Two Towers and Return of the King, where you could unlock characters and go on different difficulties and select which ones. And then they had Conquest, which was by Pandemic, who made the Star Wars Battlefront, where you do a capture the flag equivalent. And then there was also the Third Age, which it was kind of their answer to doing Electronic Arts deciding, let's do RPG. You take turns, whacking somebody, back and forth like on a board game. But it didn't completely work, because it's like, okay, we have to believe that these other dwarves and elven warriors are alongside Gandalf as he's fighting the Balrog. Okay, why not just come up with your own storyline?
Yeah. But
or you fight alongside maybe the Fellowship at Helm's Deep or something, but don't intrude upon the actual story that we know actually happened.
Yeah, that game was like a weird hodgepodge of different, like they had great world building in it. They had some great they wrote some good sort of add-ons to the obviously story that everybody knows, but it was a bit of a mixed bag of game elements going on. But as far as my first my first exposure to the Lord of the Rings sort of story, I was 6, like 5 or 6 when the movie came out, the first one.
Oh wow.
And I saw that in the cinema with my parents, and I didn't know what to make of it, but it did scare me a lot.
They wanted to see it, and you're like, I guess I'm going.
yeah. But then this was in the times of VHS tape. So we had a VHS of the Fellowship of the Ring, and I would just watch it as I grew up, just on repeat till I wore the tape out. And then, of course, like the next Christmas, Two Towers came out, and then that's when the sort of rollout of the video games started happening. And I don't think I had a console for a couple of years after that, but when I finally got one, I made it my business to sort of get the PlayStation Two Towers game and the Return of the King and the Third Age and all of that sort of stuff.
Very nice.
So kind of, I don't know, as Lord of the Rings games is concerned, I did them all in like chronological order as they were coming out.
Sweet. And it's a fun feeling too when you kind of accomplish all these impossible tasks. I tried some of the other ones, and it is important to note for all the Tolkien experts, yes, there was plenty before and after produced, with or without the Warner Brothers or MGM licenses, and there was a Hobbit game produced back in like the early 2000s. I had it on my father's PC. Wasn't very good. It was,
oh man,
It was by
I love.
Universal's.
I thought that was great.
Oh, really? I tried, but
that was I think that was like a 2003 thing. So I think as everyone was waiting for the last movie to come out, I was playing that. That it is a pretty weird thing, but like design wise, it's pretty like, it's good. It's accessible for kids. It got me to read the book afterwards.
Oh, okay. Well, one good thing came out of it.
Yeah, totally.
I just found the task and voice acting and glitches to be very irritating. I think I was this close to wanting to throw it in the trash, but
yeah,
it was owned by Universal. That's the Sierra Vivendi Games thing. So that ironically, coincidentally, there was a Fellowship of the Ring game that they reissued, and it was coming out at the same time as the actual movies, and so it's just so weird how they're trying to make it look like the movie without actually looking like the movie, and so I'm sure a lot of people were disappointed, but
there was a lot of that. There was a bit of that going around because they were making that Fellowship of the Ring game, as you said, when the film was still in production. But there was another. I was talking to one of the designers of the Two Towers game, which came out the year later. This is a couple of years ago. I was talking to him, and he said that there was supposed to be like a Fellowship of the Ring video game in the style of the games that came later, like the Two Towers and Return of the King.
I did
like
see
a hack
that
slash
article,
sort of thing.
But that's cool to know someone who could actually confirm. And I think it's since you're in Sydney, and you probably encountered a bunch of people who worked on all kinds of giant entertainment productions.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of them are in the film game now. A lot of the people that worked at Stormfront Studios and EA back in the day, they all went on to have successful movie careers. Because I think the production on those two was a bit dicey, and some of them couldn't quite see themselves working in that field.
I imagine. And you never know just what's going to be expected and what changes are going to happen.
Oh yeah, and I think with those, the Two Towers and Return of the King especially, that was the ultimate test, because they were having to make a video game based on a movie that was still in production. So all the designs and all the references they had to work with, they were getting them. They were just scans of photographs from Weta Workshop and the studios in New Zealand. So they didn't really have like a clear picture of what everything was going to look like as they were doing it. But I think they did a pretty good job. Those games are really fun.
It's lovely. And keep in mind, guys, they were Weta Digital was not involved with the games, but they were doing the motion capture, which is so wild because now it's second nature. You see it on a Call of Duty game or an Avatar type blockbuster. It's I mean, hell, when I saw Industrial Light and Magic trying to brag, hey, we're perfecting it, I'm like, no, you're a little late to the party, guys. With Warcraft, no, Weta already did this not only with Lord of the Rings, but also with other blockbusters like iRobot.
Oh man, that's a throwback. iRobot, indeed. On the subject of mocap, there was a I've got an animation that was one of the animators that was working on the Two Towers game. They were throwing out ideas of other characters, to include, because I think in that game you got Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. You just play those guys as you're going through, the Helm's Deep and Rohan and all those sorts of stories. Mm-hmm. But one of the animators, he animated Gollum, but it was at that stage they hadn't designed Gollum yet in New Zealand, so he just did this sort of speculative, little blue frog creature. That could spar with the Urukai and stuff, but that was, of course, scrapped because I think they wanted to save Gollum for the big screen. But like you say, all mocap stuff.
Yeah, very groundbreaking, very intriguing.
Yeah, I don't have too many tales about the Fellowship of the Ring game. I kind of sped through that. That was a tough old one.
Was
But I
it,
think
it was before they did the Battle for Middle Earth games, which were basically, select, just have multiple armies attack. You're playing God.
yeah, no, those were good. Those were very good. And just yeah, very accessible, and you can just spend hours and hours and hours.
Oh yeah, I don't think I would have
And I
had
think
enough RAM on whatever machine I was borrowing at the time.
yeah, that's a difficult thing with all that stuff. I'm a sort of Mac guy, and when I was a kid, I didn't have much of a choice on what computer platform we had, so I couldn't run most of those games until I was in like my teens or a bit later on. But like to this day, I still see people modding those old Battle for Middle Earth games and adding their own factions and voices and things like that. So that it had legs evidently, and sort of continues to excite people. And yeah, no, I think it's great. I think
Totally.
there was a oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I was just going to say that you mentioned the Conquest game. I think there's someone modding that at the moment. But
That's
I'm
lovely.
not
It was so
I'm not a
ridiculous how
very
it got some pretty bad reviews. I'm like, I don't know what you guys are smoking. This,
yeah, it was pretty good. It looked like $1,000,000. It looked great. And the taking that Battlefront sort of gameplay and mixing it in with the different armies of Middle Earth, that was a no-brainer. Who doesn't want to do that?
right. And you play as all the heroes and villains that you've always wanted to unleash their powers. I mean, that's, again, the Battlefront game engine was the perfect category for that.
Mm.
Pandemic Games, I think, got acquired by EA, and I know EA is kind of rivaled with Activision in terms of pissing off a bunch of people, but that's a whole different story.
Mm.
I didn't play Aragorn's Quest. I know that was kind of one of those where it's like a cartoonish version, like almost borderline hackneyed anime kind of looking of
Yeah.
for more kids. And then I was always seeing War in the North and the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games, which were M-rated, for extra gore, and those were kind of their own take on it, just in general. Like they're kind of doing what the Rings of Power show were doing, where it's like, okay, so they're not adapting everything from the movies, but they're trying to be consistent at the same time while also respectful to the book readers. So it's a tough
Yeah.
line to walk. How do you make everyone happy? I did want to play the Lego Lord of the Rings games, but I never got a chance. I did, however, play plenty of other Lego games.
Mm. Yeah, I played the Lego ones. Those were good. They did like a Lego. They did the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then they did a Hobbit Lego, which I think collected the first two films, and then they didn't have any Battle of the Five Armies
Bummer.
levels, which I think maybe yeah, I think that was probably telling of how that particular movie was doing.
Yeah, I think that's a safe way to keep it there. I mean,
And
yeah, I
the
mean, there should be so many more Lord of the Rings games at this rate. Really, I mean, you
I
could
think
do
it's
so
just I think it's just because to chalk it up to those few games like Aragorn's Quest and stuff that kind of missed the mark a little bit. Although that was probably fun for kids. I think
I
may have
mean,
been
when I even
bit too
saw
old.
when I saw Return of the King in theaters back in the day, there was even that was kind of when you started seeing ads for all kinds of other stuff, like coming to HBO or TNT this fall. I would see ads for cable TV shows. I would see ads for video games, and they played a bunch of PlayStation 2 ads, and they also heavily promoted the Lord of the Rings video games. So I was just like, see, that's where I think inter advertising kind of really began before the internet took over, before people were trying to come up with the next YouTube or TikTok. But yeah, no, I didn't even realize that the main Lord of the Rings online game has still been active. I thought that got shut down, but I had that mistaken with the other Warner Brothers owned property, The Matrix. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings online is, yeah. By the time that I came around to it was probably in 2014. It had already been going for years and years and years, and I still see it getting updated every
It's
once in a while
changed a
now,
lot of
which is just
licenses. Midway and Turbine were the main guys, and then they passed it over to Warner Brothers Interactive, and then now Daybreak Games Company, I think, is supervising it. They're like part of Sony and oversaw another initial online game back in 03. So I do find it interesting how all these different other companies, I mean, it's even more mind-blowing how MGM owned the rights to The Hobbit, and now MGM is now owned by Amazon, who now also owns, the Rings of Power. And I'm interested in seeing what future stuff can bring, because I know they got an anime in development with Miranda Otto coming back as Eowyn and Brian Cox being the narrator, and I just have no idea where this franchise is going to go next. I hope to God they never remake it, though.
Yeah, I always, every time I see an update, a lot of the stuff that I see is seems like speculation, but I hope that they refrain from trying to rehash Lord of the Rings, because it's
right.
It's a one thing to do, reshoot all those scenes differently, but you think about all the new design work that has to happen. You have to sort of change people's, for so many people, Sting looks a certain way and Minas Tirith looks a certain way because they've seen the films, again and again. So people have this idea in their head of what everything's supposed to look like in that world, and to have to get a crew on to redesign everything, that'd be a real tough one. It'd be like redesigning Star Wars, I guess.
Yeah, and you don't want to go down the Star Wars rabbit hole. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, there's all that too.
Altogether, I mean, go ahead.
I was going to say that I haven't been paying that close attention, but as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen any Rings of Power merchandise anywhere.
Yeah, missed opportunity for
let alone
sure.
a game.
They've overspent so much on it, and I think I can't see anyone really doing anything with that other than like maybe a new Monopoly set or trading card game. I don't know if they personally don't know what to do with the merchandise, but another game would be wonderful. I mean, I would love to. I don't play games anymore, but I would love to even see there be a Rings of Power game.
Yeah, I just wonder what it would be about and what they would do. I've kind of blocked out most of the show, most of the stuff that I watched, as the episodes are rolling out. It was quite exciting for the first 2 episodes, but I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened later on. But
basically they're going down to a lot of the other inner cities that are vaguely mentioned, as well as, in between not Isengard. Actually, yes, in between Isengard and Rohan, and basically just, I mean, it helps that they have a lot of tips and tricks, and there's different people who find other stuff kind of easy to predict. I kind of find it interesting how they are fleshing out, again, Isildur and all these other guys who eventually become, Sauron. It's just like it reinforces to me how he is literally the Anakin Skywalker of his day and age, where he is, he's screwing it up for everybody. You would think he'd be a well-intended anti-hero, and he's just becoming a tyrant.
Yeah, I think we have to wait a whole year before we see how all that stuff pays off. I'm curious to see if they go the full 5. I think there was 5 seasons they were slated to make. it's gonna be quite a while before you can collect a big Rings of Power box set, I imagine.
Oh, I imagine
Yeah.
so.
Did you? So you said you played the War in the North?
I didn't, but I saw it heavily promoted, and I wanted to play it. Do you have any experience?
Yeah, that one was that came out when I was in high school, and that was one of the first like gruesome. You know, you could cut orcs' heads off and cut their arms off and whatnot. Again, and it was just like another. The story was very, very light on story, but the action was great, and it was kind of yeah, the premise was just sort of based on I forget what the line is, but there's a line in the book. You know, Gandalf is, I think he's talking to some of the hobbits, and he's just saying, you know, this whole war thing could have really gotten out of control if a handful of people in the north weren't, you know, keeping things together and, you know, protecting those borders while we were out here doing our thing in Gondor and Rohan. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the game sort of follows these three, you know, an elf, a dwarf, and a ranger, and their little adventures in the north, stopping, you know, the little servants that Sauron has posted up around there. So it was pretty. You got to see some places that you'd never been before, which was very cool. And it was done in the sort of, you know, the Peter Jackson style, so you could see these characters from the book, and yeah, it was quite well done. But like I say, it was very action heavy, but yeah, it was damn good. And then that was sort of the prelude to Shadow of Mordor, in a way. That was like the first of the gruesome Lord of the Rings titles.
Yeah, very gritty. And I mean, to be fair, it was always blurring that line in between, you know, for kids versus for young adults. You know, you get bloody descriptions in the book, but you know, the movies get a PG-13 because the blood is black and it's fantasy versus, you know, a realistic war movie.
Yeah, there's when you look at the list of things that have come out, that Lord of the Rings has, you know, that world is so dense, and you know, there's so many good chapters in the book, which is just characters hanging out or singing or, you know, doing whatever. But I think video games, if you look at the list of all the games that have come out, especially since the movies have been released, it's all just been hacking and slashing and jumping and emphasis on the battles and stuff. I think the only one that kind of has like a well-rounded depiction of, you know, that Tolkien's world is probably Lord of the Rings Online. That's probably the most varied Middle Earth experience you're probably going to get, and that's probably why it stuck around, you know, to this day.
Yeah, sure. Any other game premises you'd like to see?
Oh man, I don't know. I'd just like to see more of you know. I'm not too sure. That's a tough one. I'd like to see more. You know, movie tie-in games. I'd like to see more Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings titles, but I wouldn't know what you would do. I'd like to see a Build a Pony video game, I guess. Find out what he got up to.
You could reformat. I mean, I could see them doing a more diverse kind of game where you actually go around crafting like your own soldier, your own army, decide if you want to be a Dunedain Ranger versus you know, Gondor Guard, or
Yeah,
a guy guarding the Shire for the hobbits, you know.
if they were able to do like a Mass Effect style game where you have sort of conversation choices and your character changes depending on your actions. Your actions have consequences, that sort of thing. But I'm not too sure. I think we're about to see more video games come out with the, like you said, the animation, the Riders of Rohan animation that comes out next year. So maybe that'll kick things off again, and we'll see a bit more Lord of the Rings goodness out there.
Totally.
I will say, as even if some of the games are hit and miss, they have probably they've been lucky with the amount of big Hollywood actors that have lent their voices to like the game characters or doing the narration. Like you were talking about Conquest. I'm pretty sure Hugo Weaving does all the narration for that. And in those Battle for Middle-earth games from back in the day, that's Ian McKellen, and I think Christopher Lee narrates the
tactics,
the bad guys. Yeah,
it was on the PSP, and I saw it advertised a lot. It was pretty well rated.
Yeah. They just I don't know what contract those guys signed, the actors back in the day, but they had Viggo Mortensen and Orlando Bloom and John Rhys Davies. They all appeared for the Two Towers, and then for the Return of the King game, they had Elijah Wood and
it was
Sean
heavily
Astin.
promoted on the DVD too.
So they got very lucky.
Coming soon, and you can play, back during CD-ROM games, and you can play, preview if you want to put it in your Xbox, yada yada. I miss that kind of in movie kind of stuff. Now no one has the time, and everything's digital, but but that still can work in everyone's favor, for Steam and what have you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Okay. All right. Welcome, Kyler. Welcome, my dude.
Hello, give me just a second.
Kyla Thornton in the studio. Another Lord of the Rings super fan.
Welcome. Speaking of Amazon,
okay,
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, all good.
No, you're right.
Welcome.
Can y'all hear me fine now?
Yes, sir. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Sorry about all that. I just had to
Zoom has
delete and reinstall.
No, it happens once in a while. Welcome to the show. And Kyler, how long have you been into the Lord of the Rings Tolkien fandom?
I've been in it for quite some time. So I'm 23. I want to say probably since I was 8-ish. I've always had like a knack for medieval things, but Lord of the Rings really kind of took the trophy on that and kind of pulled me a lot more into it.
Very nice.
What part of the world are you in at the moment, Kyla?
What part of the world? Sorry.
Yeah, he's based in Sydney. Yeah.
Okay, the real dude. I thought you were talking about in the Tolkien universe. I was like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
You can tell me that as well if you fancy.
I mean, I live in Texas. I think me and Cameron, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You're in Austin
Dallas
area.
It's all good.
Dallas?
Yep.
Okay. I had it twisted. I'm about 3 hours south of there in College Station, Texas.
Fantastic.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, we were talking earlier how it's interesting with these Lord of the Rings games, how depending on their license depends on, what it's adapting. Is it their own take on the books? Is it adapting a cartoon? Is it adapting the movies?
Yeah, or like the new show.
Right. We were surprised by that how there hasn't been a game based on the show yet, but I don't know if it's just that Amazon spent so much on it, some production hell or what, but
I bet it'll come soon. I mean, there's plenty to do with it, whether that's good or bad, but there's definitely plenty to do with it. And I don't know if y'all know, did Amazon just buy rights for the show, or did they kind of buy rights for?
I think it was just for the show, because I did talk to some other Tolkien heads, like lore of the Rings, and they noted how they could only adapt it to a certain point. They were not, even though they referenced the score from the movie, they couldn't, and they're trying to make it canon with that. They couldn't actually show scenes or reference certain elements from certain books or parts of the movie. So it's definitely in a gray area, It's like how, but kudos to anyone who can pull off anything and just make it consistent for the most part.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I know a lot of people are up and down about it, but personally, I mean, as much of a fan as the original stuff I am, I like that they're kind of doing some more with it, even if it's not necessarily the best route. It's just more kind of eye candy for me.
And if it gets people to read the books again, I mean, that's good too. I'm sure that's happened as a result of the TV show and the sort of the different takes they're having on the iconic characters. It's probably getting people to go back to the books and have a bit of having a look and see if see if it lines up. But who knows? I think it'll be interesting to see what the second season of Rings of Power looks like now that they've moved, from New Zealand to Europe with a new crew and all of that.
Did they do that?
Yeah, they did.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was I think partly a result of the super strict lockdown laws that New Zealand had at the time. Because obviously all the Amazon executives were in the States and they couldn't fly in and out of New Zealand.
I wouldn't want to. I'd be like, dude, I got to go on 50 other press junkets.
Yeah.
We were talking about how they had a Hobbit game by Sierra as well as a Fellowship game, but it looked like the movie, but it wasn't like the movie. And then EA, Electronic Arts, got involved. What was your intro to playing the LOTR games?
For me, I'm trying to think. So I remember back in the day, I don't know when it came out. This is just a brief memory. The Lord of the Rings Online.
Sweet.
I played that not long. I played a lot of World of Warcraft, so that as much as I like Lord of the Rings, that was kind of my MMO RPG of choice.
You exist in this world.
Yeah. But I played that for a little while. Not much. However, I did play Lord of the Rings Conquest. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with that.
Last one I played too. And why do you think it got such mediocre reviews when it was, again, like the Battlefront? It was giving the player kind of the basics, the nuts and bolts. It was like, you can play as your hero and villains, and you capture this flag, and you can conquer Middle Earth or fight for it.
I'm with you there. I would, if they did some sort of remaster or something like that, I would go absolutely crazy on that. I'd play it nonstop. I
It's
feel like the
like,
only
I don't know.
go ahead.
It must have been just some corporate media thing. I get that EA is like Activision where they have off-color remarks, but I don't see what it failed to deliver on in terms of the premise.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, you get to play as just about anything in the universe
Yeah.
almost.
And or you're a guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could ride a warg in that game. That was pretty cool.
Even an eagle, I
ride
think
horses.
you could play as. Yeah.
Yeah. It would, and they had basically any location, any map you could think of to play in.
Really, pretty much.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the player. I don't know how many people you could get onto one game. I'm not too sure, but if memory, it was
I think
pretty
it was up
big.
to 4.
Yeah,
but plus online. Almost all those games had an online component. I think so. It was just like, yeah, it's giving you what you want. I don't know what is a missed opportunity here.
I don't understand it.
They should have another stab at a Conquest-like game. Now that they have obviously the Hobbit movies have come out since then. So I wonder if that would be a go.
I'd be down.
I'd be all for it. I'd play it every day.
I'd get back into gaming.
It's an expensive old hobby these days.
Right?
I made the mistake of purchasing. Well, I pre-ordered the Gollum game, the notorious Gollum game from.
I think that's a good segue. So I haven't played it. I know a lot of people were complaining about everything from the gameplay to the animation to the premise, and it doesn't have anything to do with the movies or books. I guess it's just.
Yeah, I mean, I had to stop maybe 3 hours in because I just sort of threw my hands up and just said I can't. The way it plays isn't very. It's not very accessible, I would say. It's a bit of a tough one.
A half-ass game. Gotcha.
Yeah, but the design, I was drawn to it just because it looked, different to anything we'd seen before. Like design wise, everything looked pretty. They had fresh takes on the Mouth of Sauron and Mirkwood, and Gandalf looked different, and they obviously had a completely new voice cast for everyone. So I was drawn to that side of it just to see a fresh take on all of that sort of stuff, but it just played very, very badly. But it is $9. I think today, I think on Amazon Prime, you
lost
get it for
that
$9.
Money. No one wants to buy it except for the morbidly curious. That's
how much was it originally?
I got it for like $100 Australian, which is probably like $50 where you guys are from.
Oh, my Lord.
Had I waited, I feel like a bit of a goose, but you live and learn.
We get goosed all the time. Wow. So usually when I see a game based on a popular property, it's tough to tell what's legit versus what's just people being kind of toxic online. And so this is interesting to me because it's kind of like one of those aliens games. I think it was Colonial Marines, which a lot of people same kind of deal. People were complaining about the gameplay, voice acting, and other glitches. And it's like, but it's so hard to kind of get to the nuts and bolts because you got to go through just, the unimaginative reviews before you get to the people who can make an engaging review and tell you the pros and cons.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was one of those, because I'd seen what people had said about that title, sort of like a month before it was released. And I said, no, we'll see how it goes. Like, it's obviously very hard if you're having to reimagine all these things and adapt Gollum, take the character from the book and into the video game format. Like, it's a very strange character to want to base a video game around in the first place. Like, he's a pretty pitiable murderer, sort of. It was just a very strange direction, but it only took me a couple of hours to realize that everything that I've read online about it is founded apropos. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have preferred more of a game on, say, Aragorn, something like that. Maybe not Gollum.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. It'd be fun if they tried what they kind of did halfway with the Third Age, but maybe just have people fight all the other battles that are often mentioned during the Second and the Third Age, but you don't really see enough of. I'd like to do one with Eomer or some of the other, maybe Eowyn's tribe, just go around and just do other side quests while on their way to Gondor.
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. There's so much they could do. There's so many different factions that would be interesting to follow. And now, these days there's so many different types of games you can attempt.
Yeah, speaking of that, have y'all ever played that phone game that recently came out? It's Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth.
I think I saw a brief promo for it. Did you get a chance?
Oh, dude, I mean, I was playing it an hour ago. I play it. I play it every single day. It's pretty neat. It really delves you into kind of all the different types of characters, like different clans, things like that. Like, you've got your Rohan, Dúnedain. Sorry, I'm trying to think. I should know this. I was playing it 20 minutes ago, at least. But basically, it's just got a whole bunch of characters in it. You collect them, you gear them up, level them up. Right now, they have a Mines of Moria raid, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, sweet. Do you get?
And one thing
is it during Gimli's, like, I forget the name of his father. I think it was Balin, or is it later on?
Gloin.
Gloin is the father.
Gloin. Okay, my God.
Yeah, Balin was in the Mines of Moria when it fell. At least I think. I don't want to sound stupid here, but
he was in like an expedition that
that's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, and he was killed, and the Fellowship in the books and in the movies they visit his tomb and they have the big fight with the cave troll.
Yeah, so in this game, which is pretty interesting because it's a relatively new game, so they're coming out with more and more content, more and more characters, but they make games similar to this. They have a Star Wars version that I've touched on a little bit, but what they do is they start to delve into like shattered timelines. So say Balin took over was able to reclaim the Mines of Moria. Recently, they just released like a Balin, like a king version of him. along with some companions of his that I guess they created or something.
Oh,
but
nice.
it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so you can kind of, and they have little stories on it. I mean, the story's not very great, but it's interesting take on it.
All right. Well,
I think it's just.
try it.
I think people just like hanging out with those characters. Even if the game sucks, it's cool. You know, the characters are very cool and very compelling, and I think you could make sort of anything. I mean, they make like slot machine, like Lord of the Rings slot machine games. I think people just like to see the characters and the environments.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sort of attractive, I don't know, iconography, all of that stuff. It's just
essentially it.
I definitely recommend it if you like that kind of stuff. It's like character collection. Like they currently have Strider right now, but I assume eventually they'll have different versions of him and his different, like, throughout his life, because they've done that in their like Star Wars game.
Great.
Already.
But another thing I liked about it is I'm a big phone game or a mobile game player. However, a lot of the time they take up a lot of time. This one I can get on for just a few minutes at a time, get my things done that I want to get done. It's a pretty slow paced game, but because it's character collection, I don't really mind it being slow paced. And also I'm working all the time, so it's nice when I'm just like taking a quick break from work. I can hop on there for 10 minutes or so and get my stuff done for the next few hours on the game.
It's no different than venting at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just have fun. 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That was the nice quality of the early 2000s games. It was just, you know, the levels were nice and short. It was just jump in, have a bit of fun, and then jump out.
Yeah.
Nowadays
Star
things
Wars,
are so long.
I played, I want to say back in 2016, 2017-ish. And it was one of those where you select your characters and have them, it didn't matter what side they're technically on. You just have them kind of just like a chess game, just have them go on whichever side of the board you want and just kick each other's ass. But the game crashed so much on my phone. I think my phone was just very bad that I just, after a while, just had to call it quits. But great premise.
Absolutely.
Definitely better than the new Battlefronts, where you're literally just spending thousands just to unlock certain characters and kick the other team's ass. It's not realistic.
Yeah. I will say this Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle Earth, definitely it's EA, I'm pretty sure, so it's got its money grabs in there, don't get me wrong. But just the collection aspect of it is pretty fun to me.
Yeah, I mean, you want this to be fun too.
Yeah. And like usually the big spenders, that's just so you can max out your gear earlier than other people and all this and all that. But the game really is, I'd say 95% totally free to play. So you can collect all of the characters. It might just take a little bit longer if you are free to play.
Oh, better later than never.
Exactly. But they come out with characters usually about 2 to 3 a month. So, I mean, you're never really running out of things to collect and stuff to do. So, if something comes out and you can't get it right then, you got other stuff to take care of anyway.
Oh, I'll check those out. Not sure when I'll get the time, but I'll make some time.
If you guys like, if you enjoyed Lord of the Rings Conquest from back in the day, there's a there's something called Conquest Reimagined. I don't know if they're still working on it, but it's basically a remaster of that title with new new factions you can play as. Perhaps they got a cease and desist, but maybe they're still going, because their Instagram has lots of like redesigned Urukai armor, like new orc designs. It's all pretty impressive. So maybe have a look into that. If you
what was it called again?
It's called Conquest Reimagined.
Okay, is it on PC or?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it's probably on PC. I would say that is a pretty good guess. But it's
I mean, because that's what I was saying. If they come out with something, I'm playing it. I don't care what it is.
Yeah. And there's also, if you fancy the Battle for Middle-earth titles, like the sort of Age of Empires style games, there's a mod for that called Age of the Ring.
Sweet.
And that is I think they've gone about and they've designed all of the Hobbit armies, the dwarves, the Mirkwood elves. They've added all of that sort of stuff to the game, and a bunch of characters that appear in the books but weren't in the movies. They've sort of they've designed them with the sort of Weta Workshop Peter Jackson aesthetic in mind, and that's something you can play if you know anything about modding, which I have no clue, but it's out there.
I didn't know they had an Age of the Ring game.
It's a mod for the Battle for Middle-earth 2 game.
Oh, okay. I see. I'm looking at it now.
Nice.
Is that Battle for Middle-earth 2? Is that like Age of the Empires? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's the one.
Man, when did that come out?
I want to say like 2005 or something like that. I could be wrong.
Because I pretty regularly play Age of the Empires. I go on little sprees every couple months. So if I don't know how I didn't know there was a Lord of the Rings version of it. That's pretty upsetting.
Some stuff isn't as promoted.
Yeah, well, I know what I'm doing when I get home.
There we go.
The spirit. Do you think these games appeal because they're also just, aside from just the obvious epicness, do you think they're just very easy to get into, even if you're just haven't even seen the movies or read the books?
I feel like if you're into medieval-esque sort of things, yeah, I would say they'd be pretty easy to get into.
All right. Cool.
I think a lot of it for me is probably nostalgia. Like every time a new one comes out, I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be like the ones that I played when I was a kid, but I don't think you'll ever get that back. I don't think it'll ever live up to the experience you had when you were young and playing those things for the first time. So I think it's a bit of like nostalgia and a bit of like they're pretty straightforward, good versus evil stories that sort of anyone can get behind. And like I said before, the characters are just so cool. and there's something for everyone. There's elves, dwarves, wizards, and
sure.
within that, have all these different. You have kings, you have basically orphans, you have I don't know, just trying to break down the fellowship. And the fellowship, what have you got?
I would have loved a game where you get to play as various wizards.
Yeah, well, there was one.
They hint at other ones. There's Brown and all that, and I just always wish that could be tapped into a little more in Middle Earth.
There was supposed to be EA Redwood back in the day was working on a game called The White Council, which was about...
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so it would have been about, Gandalf and Saruman and the White Council and what they got up to. I don't know why they stopped working on that, but I think at the time they were working on that, the films had already been out for a couple of years, so maybe the interest was kind of dying down. But I'll have to look into that. But I think that was something that people were definitely looking into. But there's plenty of wizarding stuff in Lord of the Rings Online if you're that way inclined.
See,
so might have to try that.
I would hop into Lord of the Rings Online a little more. I actually earlier this year I looked into it again from back in my childhood, but I don't know if they updated the graphics in that game, I'd probably play it.
Sweet.
But it's pretty outdated for my liking.
Yeah. All good.
I don't envy the writers of that game. Whoever has to come up with all of the all the quests and all the poems and riddles and stuff that sort of pervade that game. It's a mountain of work. And you could get lost in there for, I'm sure, years at this point, because there's so much content added to it.
For sure. Well, other than that, I think you guys have summed up a lot of the ones that are just very heavily recommended. Would you guys care to promote anything you guys are doing in any way, shape, or form? We like to help out the little guy. So.
I've got nothing. I'm off social media and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose just support your local film industry. I guess that's
all right. That's a great
what
idea.
I would say.
Kyla, if you got any business or anything else?
Well, this isn't anything related to Lord of the Rings at all, but I am a health insurance agent in the United States. I know that's some people don't like health insurance, understandably, but I am a health insurance agent in the United States. I can cover people nationwide. So if you need some health insurance on the private market, exempt from ACA and Obamacare, give me a shout at kylercareinsurance@gmail.com.
Okay, very nice.
And I'm sorry, that's spelled weird. So it's KYLARKARE insurance@gmail.com.
Very cool. Alrighty.
I would say this too. If you like Lord of the Rings stuff, you should give the OneRing.net a look in, because love
that site.
They've been the sort of premier Lord of the Rings folks for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
Forever, and they're good guys. In fact, I was messaging Cliff, who's one of the hosts of the podcast this morning, and he funnily enough, he was the voice of Samwise in the Fellowship of the Ring game, the Vivendi game. So if you got the game on Xbox, you can hear Cliff do his best Samwise Gamgee.
Nice.
Give those dudes a look.
I will.
Will do it.
EA Games. Challenge everything.
another lovely guest we've been meaning to meet up for a while. And who other than Josh Skaar from the SMAC Podcast?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Anytime. All your superhero needs, he's got you covered.
We try. We do our best. For me, it's mostly Captain America and like the Marvel stuff, but I love Nightwing, Superman, Batman. We try to cover everything. As of recording, we just released our review of the 2019 Power Rangers Ninja Turtles comic crossover, which was really good. So
that's wild.
If you like superhero stuff, if you like going into comics, movies, TV, that's us. We do it all.
You've done some other ones as well, and we'd love to have you on for some of the other fun comics and crossovers and everything. But in the meantime, I mean, this is just kind of cool, just seeing how for such an epic franchise that's, you know, dominated the book verse and the big screen movies, and now has a show that, divisive as it is, you know, still cut the mustard in terms of ratings. So, I mean, what do you think it is about a Lord of the Rings video game in general that twists it around and makes it its own cup of tea?
It's obviously the world. Tolkien did such a great job of world building in his books. Like, you could argue a third, if not half of those books are all based or dedicated to world building. So you have this really fleshed out world that he has described to the viewer, and it's very easily translatable. Like, I'm trying to remember the guy's name who did the animated Lord of the Rings.
Botsky.
Yeah. And like the translation he had is, I mean, it's animated, but it's almost identical as far as like the aesthetic of everything into the live action stuff we've gotten. And I mean, it's so influential to everything. Like the way he describes the dwarf caverns is stuff you'll see in D&D. It's stuff you'll see in Dragon Age Origins or the Dragon Age games. Like it just transcends everything because of how influential it was at the time and how
Dragon
well he
Age,
built that world.
I have not heard in forever.
Dragon Age Origins is one of my all-time favorite games. I've been meaning to go back and play it, but I don't know that I have 60 hours to dedicate to one thing anymore.
You know what? Let's do a special on that in the future. But yeah, I mean, that and Dynasty Warriors, Dragon Guard. It seems like so many games just kind of, they find their own formatting, and it's just out of this world. But what do you make overall of just why it's just so epic to play as these various characters and do other stuff that's not in either version of the movie or book, but still intense and engaging?
I mean, what makes it special to play Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed? It's the escapism, it's the wish fulfillment to be able to be this character that lives in this world that you can't be in physically, but you know, emotionally, mentally, you can correspond with them. And just being like, who doesn't love medieval times? And this one has magic and elves and dwarves and orcs that you can just lop their heads off. Like it's a great world to just turn your moral compass off, essentially, because more often than not, the person who looks evil is probably going to be evil, and you can make a good moral decision.
There is definitely no shortage of decisions.
When we brought up this topic, I saved the Wikipedia page. I didn't realize there had been so many games made for Lord of the Rings. Like the gaming stuff goes all the way back to 1982. And it's what we've been talking about, where it's just such a rife era and world that you can do what you really want to, and it's open to interpretations. Different people can decide what's important, what's not important. Like we had with Peter Jackson, where Tom Bombadil's not important to this story.
He really isn't.
But there are thousands of people who are upset that Tom Bombadil was not in those movies.
How dare we kill time?
So like it's really just interesting to see where people decide to go with this, because like if you want to get into I'll say it with air quotes, the Hobbit movies, which that in my opinion really should have been just 2 movies, but they fluffed it out because money. Like with that, do you really need the guy that can turn into a bear, which I'm forgetting his name?
Bjorn.
Yeah,
he would be great to play in a game, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Without all that emphasis, and they spend so much time on just kind of the action for stuff that when you read the book, I mean, I can understand omitting stuff because it's excessive or just not theatrical, but there's a lot of stuff in there where I'm like, it's killing a lot of development time. I'm really not connected to anyone. The actors are making them charming, but I'm not sure they read that way as they do on under the script or in the book. But yeah, Bjorn comes out of nowhere, and I'm like, so
you got rid of Tom Bombadil, but we're keeping this guy that's essentially kind of the same fork in the road character for the story. Yeah. Like, I mean, he shows up in the third movie, which, a little bit of payoff, but is it really that important? But
and when the title battle is lasts 10 minutes on screen and then goes back to a personal sword fight, I'm like, okay, so.
But they needed him for the Lego game. I think that was the most important thing.
That works.
Which I forgot they did a Lego Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna have to go back and find those.
I saw I played the Indiana Jones one. Those were fun. But...
I played the Indiana Jones and the Star Wars and most of the DC and Marvel ones. But the Lord of the Rings one, I remember I played the demo, and that was when they started using sound clips from the movies instead of it just being like this.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Instead of it being this little cute pantomime thing. And that's where the Lego games kind of started losing me, is when they started doing the voice acting and just copy and pasting, voice matching. And
before AI ruined everything.
Yeah. I think the Lord of the Rings games was the first one that actually did that, and that just kind of killed the allure of the Lego games for me, because it was all about like how they interpreted what the Lego pieces were doing, because it was kind of like a kid playing with the Lego bits, and now it's just like, oh, well, now the kid's just setting up the pieces and putting them up against the screen so that the characters have voices.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that way with some of those Lego animated movies too, where I'm like, okay, it's fine.
I think the Lego movie is really good until you get to the twist, which we're off topic.
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
I meant some of the made for TV movies that.
Oh yeah, like the Ninjagos and all that stuff.
Barely what I could even call a movie. More like
that's.
I mean, more like a lesser GI Joe kind of thing where it's meant to sell a toy.
Just gonna say it's the 80s TV show model or animated series model where it's just a really long commercial to sell to kids.
Oh, what can we do?
Merchandising.
Spaceballs the cereal. Spaceballs the video game.
The toilet paper.
The
flamethrower.
The flamethrower. I mean, so we were looking at some other stuff we're surprised never really happened. And we were told there's a Strider video game in the works. What aspect of LOTR fandom do you think would actually bring not only just fans a lot of joy as a playable field, but also do a lot for the gaming industry?
Lord of the Rings is such a niche thing. It really depends on what kind of genre they want to put it in. Like if it's going to follow the Assassin's Creed formula, then I think it's going to appeal to that base plus whoever wants to play a Lord of the Rings game. Cause I mean, they've covered so many different aspects of gaming. They've had RTSs, which Sierra made an RTS game back in the early 2000s, which I didn't know.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to find that one.
We were mixed on the Hobbit one, but apparently the Fellowship one was wild because it came out to capitalize on the fact that there was a movie and yet didn't have anything to do with the movie. It was just like the book.
Yeah. I saw my high school girlfriend, dating myself. My high school girlfriend was playing that game, and I was just flabbergasted at how bad it looked. And I didn't even realize it was a Sierra game. But like, I do kind of want to go back and play it just to see how it actually lines up with the book.
More of a curiosity now.
Yeah, it's basically it's basically a Tomb Raider, but set with you as Bilbo instead of Lara Croft.
Yeah.
And I think slightly better graphics.
Funny how it works, man. Funny how it works.
But yeah, the other Sierra game, the RTS was War of the Ring, which it was a non-canon. It was based off of the appendices where Tolkien had kind of laid out aspects.
Okay.
Yeah, it laid out aspects of unimportant battles. I think according to the Wikipedia, there are 2 battles that are actually like important. One of them is where are you? I lost it. Sorry.
Okay.
Where's the plot here? I was reading the plot. The Battle of Pelennor Fields and the defense of Osgiliath. Those 2 are like important battles that actually are referenced and are fairly well detailed in the appendices. Everything else is just kind of like, there was this battle and there was this battle. So it kind of feels unimportant other than just like the novelty of, again, playing in the world of Middle Earth. My main experience with the Lord of the Rings as a game series came with the movie tie-ins published by EA Games, The Two Towers and The Return of the King. And I just remember the Two Towers game was just so cool. Like for the time, the graphics looked great. Like as a kid playing this thing, and like it was some of the best graphics I had ever seen. The character models looked great.
They had a tie-in with the DVD where like, hey, put this in your Xbox, you can play a sample.
yeah, I remember that. And yeah, it looked so good. And you played through in the Two Towers, you actually played through like some of the more action-packed sequences from Fellowship, and then you also played like the Battle of Helm's Deep was so much fun. I think that did kind of hurt.
Gory.
Yeah, I think that did kind of hurt my feelings on Return of the King, because they basically just remade that level, except instead of playing between Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas, you just played as Gandalf the White.
I was spoiled because I did ROTK first and then went back to Two Towers.
Yeah, I remember
Two Towers should have been. I would have liked it to have been multiplayer, kind of like Return of the King.
Mm-hmm.
But
I remember I got out of school one day, and my friends and we booked it to our local rental place, and we picked up Return of the King, like it was the last PS2 copy they had, and we just burned through that game in an afternoon after school. But it was a lot of fun, and I remember the escape from the Army of the Dead level, that one we got really frustrated on, because it was one of those like you're running towards the camera, so you don't know when the turns are coming or what obstacles are going to get in your way. And it's just like, why? I understand we need to see that this stuff is falling at us
a little clunky,
but we need to see the obstacles too, otherwise we're not getting out of here.
A little help here. Did you ever bother with the Third Age?
I didn't. Was that another? No, that was a Final Fantasy Tactics kind of like, right?
Mm-hmm. Kind of. It basically you're playing levels of the movies with characters created specifically for the game.
Oh, that's right. They weren't. If I remember,
you're helping Aragorn fend off Uruk-hai. You're helping Gandalf defeat the Balrog, and you're like, yeah, this isn't happening at the same time, but okay.
You're like the little kid in the Hamburger Helper, and I helped.
Yeah. And then this happened. And then this happened. And then, yeah.
Yeah, if I remember, they weren't allowed to actually recreate anything from the books because it was a movie license game. There was supposed to be something else, and then that got scrapped, and they just made a carbon copy of like Final Fantasy Tactics or 10 or something.
Yeah.
And they just made it a Lord of the Rings game.
Very confusing. That is for sure.
The publishing process. But I mean, if we can go back to the Two Towers the Two Towers and the Return of the King. I think those kind of get lost in terms of, we don't see them very much anymore, but video game adaptations of movies. I mean, you've got people that look fondly back on like GoldenEye and Spider-Man 2, the original Spider-Man 2 from 2004, not the one from 2023.
It was more than just trying to make the sale. It was also a companion piece.
exactly.
Like a novelization.
Yeah, and I think the Two Towers and Return of the King both like should be in that best adaptation or video game adaptation category. Like I just feel like they get lost because the movies are just so epic. Like who cares if they made video games off of them?
Yeah, not everyone plays the games.
Yeah, but it's just they're so good. From what I remember, like I'm basing this all purely off nostalgia at this point, but I remember having so much fun with those, and like even though they were only like 6 to 8 hour games, I remember buying them and keeping them for a long time. And this is the era of trade-ins and like GameStop's
giving
rise.
It back.
Yeah, until I got rid of my Xbox and my PS2, like I played those a lot.
Damn. Weren't holding back.
No, I had fun with it. Like this was my introduction to the Lord of the Rings. Like these are the things that got me into the books. So yeah, they have a special place in my nostalgia heart.
Wait.
Did you ever play Aragorn's Quest? I'm just looking at this one through.
I never did, but I think it was just the cover was such a standoff, and I was like, see, they're trying to cash in, but for a younger audience.
Was that in the Wii era? Yep. And I felt like it's something that they downgraded for the Wii, and it just does not look great. And like that, they need to do something different with that cover if they really wanted to sell that to people.
Mm-hmm. You would have thought.
How about War in the North? Was that another one? Was that one you tried? It came out a year after.
At that point, I had given it up, but I was finding this interesting.
Fair.
How those, again, they were doing their own thing, but if you weren't keeping up with it, then you were lost. But I applaud them for just trying to have something for like the M-rated crowd, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were at the point where they were just trying. They had the IP, so they're just trying to throw something against the wall and see what stuck. But yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember that one ever really being highly regarded or a whole lot of hype towards it, even being a Lord of the Rings game. The one that I do really remember being a Lord of the Ring, a lot of hype for being a Lord of the Rings game is Shadow of Mordor, and that's mostly because of the Nemesis system. Which are you familiar with that integration?
Not. Tell me more.
So the Nemesis system, the game is a pretty standard like Witcher kind of style game. If I remember, it's a fairly open world, but it's like segmented into different sandboxes. So like you have one region that is open, then another region that's open, sort of like Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
But one of the things that they created specifically for this game is something called the Nemesis system, which is in a sense of like you're fighting in a big battle and you lose track of your health, or you run out of potions or whatever it is that heals you, and you die in battle. The AI in the game is smart enough to recognize the orc or whatever enemy that killed you, gave you that death blow. And your character basically just goes off screen, gets healed. And then when you come back, that character that killed you and like the people around him will remember that he felled you.
Gotcha.
And so like he'll rise up through the ranks and he'll be a higher rank. Yeah, exactly. And it's just I want to know more about this system. And every time I think about it, I'm like, I need to look into that. And then just other more important things come into my brain. But it's such a cool concept that just like a normal NPC character can just like stab you and be the one that gives you a game over screen and you have to reload it and pick up at an infirmary or something.
Yeah, it's kind of
the game is smart enough to be like, this guy gets a promotion because he killed the main character of the game. And so he's a sergeant or lieutenant or a chief, whatever it may be.
Fifth rehill. So you get this.
Yeah, so and like the game and the AI recognizes that. So like certain orcs that were at that battle will have like battle scars and they'll taunt you. They'll be like, oh yeah, this is the guy that Rocky killed.
Wow. It's a lot to take in.
And then with Shadow of War, they actually modified it even more that like NPCs will react to things. So like your reputation can actually be affected as well. So if you get killed by like a lowly orc instead of an uruk, that orc's going to rise up through the ranks, and then citizens from like the area that you're in are going to be like, oh, this is the guy that really sucks. And they'll talk bad about you, or they'll like remember decisions that you made. So it's similar to what they promised in Mass Effect, where like your decisions have repercussions, but really the game kind of continues on throughout until you get to certain moments in the story where like, oh, a character dies or someone won't join your party.
This happens.
Yeah, it basically just alters story moments, where in this case, it actually alters like the ambiance of the world around you. And I think that's so cool. And I really want to know more about how they can like expand it. I'm sure they have like a copyright on it, which is why we don't see it in more games. But I want to see it in more games.
Let's hope.
Because I remember when Shadow of Mordor was being pushed out, they were talking about it because I think it came out around the same time as like Arkham Asylum or Arkham City. What year was this? 2014. So that might have been Arkham Knight, actually. But that was supposed to be like the Lord of the Rings version of the Batman Arkham games, and there's a lot of hype surrounding it.
That makes sense. Warner Brothers. Okay.
Yeah, Warner Brothers kind of working against itself with that one, but I mean, the fact that they can use the Arkham engine to do anything is kind of a benefit to them. Since they have that proprietary licensing for it. But I never had a chance to play it, but this is one that's on my list. I think it might be on Game Pass now. Or at least Shadow of War might be. So that might be one to look into.
Maybe on Steam.
Once I'm done with Steam, definitely. Once I'm done with Spider-Man and Super Mario Wonder, maybe I'll get into that one. I'll need something to play.
Go for it.
I think I will.
Looking at what you got right here and now, why do you think just people even want to play as these characters? That makes it different.
It depends on how we're doing this, because if we're talking like the Lord of the Rings Online, you get to again build your own character, have your own story in the world, have it affect the world around you in some way. If we're talking about specifically Shadow of War, that one I think is more just like the the point of view character. Like I forget his name. It's something silly, but you have that point of view character that is your literal avatar into that world, and again you're just kind of doing your own thing. And I think the Nemesis system makes that all the more appealing, because again the game and the world will remember what you have done or what you have failed at doing. And I think that's a really cool concept that I don't think enough games really embrace. And they just like have a story that, while for the most part is probably entertaining, the world isn't quite immersive enough to make you feel like you're a part of it. And like you can enjoy a story, you can be immersed in a story, really. But if you're really trying to get people to feel that immersion, then what better way than to have the characters make fun of your avatar, who is you. Yeah. So, Steve the Orc took out this guy in 3 blows. Now Steve the Orc's a sergeant, and he's going to keep going and terrorizing you because you suck. And I think that's so cool. Going back and playing as Aragorn or Legolas or Gimli, unless there's new stories to be told, I don't know that that's appealing enough, because probably we've all seen these movies, we've seen these stories. Like, maybe it's a hot take, but the Strider game that's coming out, I think that's interesting because it's stuff we don't know about Aragorn, and it's before he becomes the king. So there's a whole
as opposed level to Gollum, of storytelling. Which I haven't played. I don't know if you have either, but
no, I wouldn't touch Gollum if someone paid me.
And just something about it just was a big turn off for everybody. And I'm like, well,
yeah, the aesthetic alone, no.
And
yeah, it was almost like they went, let's make Spider-Man, but with Gollum, where everyone plays as an anti-hero.
Yes, that's bad. That is bad.
Yeah, let's see. Lord of the Rings Gollum. Yeah, and that's like one of the worst reviewed games of the year too.
And
did you hear about
Yeah.
My guys over at the Video Game Club? They mentioned a story that I didn't know, but the studio, Daedalic, I believe is how you pronounce it, Daedalic Entertainment. They were like, "Oh, we're going to make this better. We're totally going to make this better." And instead they just went bankrupt and shut their doors. They released or they have one final patch scheduled for the game, and then they're just done with it because they're no longer in business. Apparently it's getting a Switch release on December 14th. Lord of the Rings Gollum, that is.
That's insane.
That's like the only game, from what I have seen of this game, the only system this game would have worked any kind of magic on is the Wii. And that's only because they had no structure in terms of like quality control. Like I worked at GameStop in the Wii's heyday, and there was a game called Ninja Bread Man. Like there if you had motion control, you could just do whatever you wanted.
I learn something every day, and it's just eye-opening that, kind of like with Morbius, it's like people mistake attention as good attention. I'm like, you're not going to make any extra money even with people going to see it and make fun of it.
I don't know who they thought this game was for. I mean,
good question.
There can be a story where Gollum Smeagol is interesting, but it's such a loose premise of you have to play as Smeagol, Gollum getting out of Mordor.
Yeah. Not to mention the character is pretty hated, so
yeah, like that's a mission that you're trying to stretch into a 15, 16-hour game. I don't know how you make that interesting, let alone the mechanics of it work.
Good question.
But I think maybe that's part of where, again, we've gotten over 30 Lord of the Rings games since 1982, and most of them have been adaptations of some kind, going back to The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and I think there is a breaking point where the bubble of interest is just like, how many times can you tell the same story over and over again? It's like Disney with their live action remakes. Like, it's the same story, you're just putting a new sheen on it. What am I really getting out of it? And in these cases, I think there is more stuff within the world of Lord of the Rings, and we kind of touched on it at the beginning. The Amazon series, forgive me, I'm forgetting the name of it.
Rings of Power.
Rings of Power. Thank you. I enjoyed it. I know there's a lot of people who don't like it because it's not necessarily 100% accurate to the appendices or the Silmarillion or anything like that.
Was the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's approachable, and some people just don't like having things be accessible to general audiences.
Considering what they had to work with, I hardly felt like it was a half-assed cash-in, but I don't know. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of having these arguments too. It's like, if you don't like it, don't like it, but don't act like you're the final person.
Yeah, if you don't like something, you don't have to watch it. I mean,
I'm sure you guys do this with comics too. It's like,
yeah, not every comic is made for everyone. Like one of my favorite writers right now is Tom Taylor, who created he didn't create Jonathan Kent, but he Superman's son, Jonathan Kent. He wrote a story where Jonathan Kent got kidnapped into an alternate dimension, came back a late teenager, like 18, 19. And he told this really great story about how Jonathan realized that he is bisexual, and he found himself a boyfriend. And Superman is just like, cool, you're my son. I love you. You do what makes you happy. But there are a whole bunch of people who are not for that. Like, my Superman's not gay. And Tom Taylor's like, well, Clark Kent is not gay. Jonathan is bisexual. Have fun reading your Clark Kent stories. I'm writing a different story.
Guys. No winning sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the end of most reasons why I don't talk about a whole lot of Star Wars on my show, is because the gatekeepers and the haters just if you even mention The Last Jedi, holy cow, the walls cave in. and just like the end of the world is happening because you had a positive opinion on something within that film.
It was even that way, even with Return of the Jedi is not as good as Empire. And then you had the Ewok movies, then you had the prequels, then you had the cartoons. And now, yeah, we're just now finally getting around to doing anything related to Star Wars, let alone Freddy and Jason. And we're just like, but we were glad we waited. Just wait for just really just kind of take a left turn and see if it improves. It didn't, but just wait it out.
Yeah. I mean, I had my doubts. I'm not trying to like hipster myself into this, but like I had my doubts with it when Disney didn't go in with a plan. Like that's mainly where my critique comes in.
I think at first it was this isn't canon, or now this is canon because we reprinted it. But then it was just the Abrams versus Lucas argument. And it's like, and I think it's just, once again, Star Wars' issue is it's designed to sell toys.
Yeah, pretty much.
But if you say that to anyone who grew up on it, oh my God, it's badass. I'm like, okay, cool. But
yeah, I've got a couple of lightsabers that could argue differently that Star Wars is not a merchandising powerhouse. But it's same, like getting back on topic with Lord of the Rings. There is merchandising potential, but it's just, I think part of it as well is that we have seen so much of this adapted into other mediums, like with World of Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons. Pretty much anything that's medieval fantasy has borrowed from that Lord of the Rings aesthetic, as we were talking about earlier. And so it kind of, even though it is kind of the godfather of modern medieval fantasy, it's also just, it's the ocean. It's a big chunk of the water that's there, but there's so much of it.
Yes. And some parts of those oceans we still drown in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anyone who's tried to read the Silmarillion might drown in that ocean.
Yeah, Silmarillion I've always appreciated with, but I have never finished. I would begin a chapter, then forget I had it, then start again.
So dense. Yeah. I can't say that I've ever actually finished it, but man, if someone wants to condense that into a 3-hour movie, I'll probably go see it.
Something. Do it.
But to kind of go back to the topic of what draws people into this universe, it's just a beautiful world. Like you could, if it's done properly, you could just happen upon an elven tribe. You could just happen upon a dwarven cave, but you've also got dragons. You've got mystical creatures. It is a beautiful world that just lends itself to different tastes for everyone.
Beautiful world with evil and peril, and yet still some hope.
Exactly. And if as long as you can give people a little bit of hope in their games, or along with a beautiful aesthetic and an engaging combat system or traversal system, whatever it may be, I think that would make itself great. But we're in a really, in terms of video games, we're in this really weird niche of, if it's not related to a pre-existing IP, and this is for movies too, if it's not a pre-existing IP, then how much money is it really going to make us? Even though, like, when I really got into gaming, if there was a game that was based on an existing IP, most of the budget went into just getting that IP, and they made the crappiest game they could make. They were just like, we want to make this Batman game. Okay, it's awful, but it's Batman. Hey, Superman, Superman 64. We want to make a Superman game. Well, we have no money left because we just bought the license to the Superman character. What can we do? The worst thing imaginable. Mm-hmm. But ever since probably the Arkham games are really kind of the first. I shouldn't say the first, like in modern era, because you've got like Turtles in Time and a whole bunch of other like arcade games based on IPs that did a really great job. The X-Men arcade games, that's like another one. But we're in this new era where the IP is supposed to be the draw, mm-hmm. but everyone wants to see what the gameplay is, and you want satisfactory gameplay. And studios don't seem to understand that.
Oh, we don't? No, I'm just kidding. Plenty of that. And it gets tiresome, as you say, because it's like, well, why even do this if you're going to half-ass it?
Exactly. And that's mostly, I think, the studios just being like, I don't understand. They asked for a Lord of the Rings game. We gave them a Lord of the Rings game. What more could they
treat it
want?
like a Happy Meal, and it's just like, that's not what they asked for. They asked for something that had heart.
Yep, exactly. And that's where I think a lot of this stuff is kind of missing the mark. But if you can find that good niche where you make the game interesting, the mechanics interesting, and you make the world look interesting, you'll get something that people will really enjoy. And I have not played the Shadow games, but from what I understand, they are really good. Like if you like The Witcher, if you like Assassin's Creed,
and much like Rings of Power, it may not be canon, but they were doing their own things. So you can't really blame them for wanting to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And from what I understand, it's a pretty decent story, even if it's not like, I believe it takes place after the events of the trilogy. So like it just tries to be its own thing, but it does, from what I understand. And maybe it's something that I have to really play to understand, but based on the scores here, at least for Shadow of Mordor, the first game, it's getting high mid 80s on Metacritic. Based for each version of the game. And then
it's pretty good.
Shadow of War, it didn't quite hit that same mark as low 80s and a 75 for the PC version, but that's still probably a win for a licensed game, in my opinion.
Ultimately, yeah. You would think,
especially when you have a gimmick as good as the Nemesis system.
How have you been liking the Nemesis system overall?
I think it's a really cool concept. I just, again, I haven't had my chance to get my hands on it, but I have seen like some Let's Plays where people are playing with it, but they never stick with the game because, again, I don't think the viewers really dive in that far into what makes the game. So when they're trying to show off the Nemesis system or they're talking about it, by the time it actually gets to a point where they could theoretically show the benefits of the Nemesis system, they've already moved on from that series to a new one because viewership is like, this is Lord of the Rings. I've seen the movies. I don't care.
One of these days we're going to combat snobbery.
Well, one thing people need to understand is that not everything has to be the best thing or the worst thing ever. Some things can just be,
it could literally
solid.
Be in between. Yeah.
Yeah. They could be solid, and that's fine. One of my favorite movies is the first Captain America movie starring Chris Evans. Like, it's a very fine movie. It's not the best thing Marvel's ever made, but I enjoy it. It's like Return of the Jedi. It's just a happy meal. It's something that makes you feel good, and it's enjoyable for what it is. It doesn't have to be the greatest interpretation ever since the last interpretation.
Oh, it should be. Yeah.
If it's not the best thing ever since the best thing ever, then what are we even doing here?
Why is it so forgettable? Why can't they make it good? It's like, I think you should. It seems like you have to literally be in the industry for people to just shut up and realize, oh, you're only as good as just what anyone gives a shit about you at all.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, for me, that's all I really got. I'm just going to start repeating myself a little bit more on these Lord of the Rings games.
Fine. Would you care to promote Talking Smack?
Oh, sure. Thank you.
SMAC.
Yeah, my podcast is Talking Smack, spelled SMAC, for superheroes, movies, animation, and comics. We talk superheroes, movie. I'm repeating myself. Yeah, we talk all those and more. TV shows, animated features, anime a little bit, and every now and then we just kind of talk about what we're doing away from the podcast. Those are episodes called What You Doin's, and we also yeah, ours is based off of Mindy from Animaniacs. Like, hey, Mr. Man, what you doing?
Nice.
And we also do superhero showdowns, which we call Talking Smackdowns, where we get fan suggestions on dream fights, and we discuss whether or not who would win, who would lose, or if they would become friends.
If you like that, you should check out Who Would Win.
Who Would Win? I think we're following each other on Twitter. I'll double check
podcast. That. Really funny. Again, same kind of deal where
I'll double check them. But you can find us on all your favorite podcatchers. Again, Talking Smack SMAC. We've got a big red and yellow banner. And Cam, thanks so much for having me on.
Anytime. Long time coming. But we've got to finally
definitely over a year because of my previous job.
It's fine. At least you didn't have to deal with insomnia, so you got that working for you.
There you go. Well, I appreciate your patience and getting me on dealing with my schedule.
Anytime. All here for it, man. Just life is short. Let's just have fun.
Amen.
All righty, guys. So you know where to find them on the interwebs. Check it out.
We'll return after these messages.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gabsy, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up